Today we're going to cover lesson 12 from the textbook, and that involves the appearance panel. We also talk about filters a little bit, or effects, whatever you want to call them, and another feature, which is, if it's right here, no, it's not there. It is right here. There we go, graphic styles. So we're going to talk about graphic styles too, and incorporate those into this little illustration that they've done for us. So this is what it's supposed to look like finished. And I've already talked about the appearance panel a little bit, but we're going to go into greater depth today. So to bring it up, I'm going to go to Window, and I'm going to select the appearance panel and make sure that that's visible. Now, right now, the appearance panel has whatever last object you had selected is what will appear in the appearance panel. So if I switch now to our start file, notice that it's that it changes. And again, that's based on what's visible or what was last selected here. I'm going to go ahead and select this bottom mountain path here. And let's go over the appearance panel itself. So at the very top, you have the name. If it's just a generic path, it's that. If you want to name the path, you can. Over to the left, these columns indicates the visibility of the properties. So for example, if I wanted to just simply, for the time being, turn off that black stroke, I could. Or if I wanted to turn off the fill, I could. Or the drop shadow. That's what we're going to do with all of these. Over here, just as we could change the stroke from over here or in the up in the options menu, or to the right in the properties panel, we can change them here too. I think what's important to note right off the bat though with the appearance panel is that nowhere else, even in these other locations, can you have multiple appearances. So what we're going to do today is we're going to add multiple fills, we're going to add multiple strokes, and that sort of thing. And that's what this is going to allow us to do. At the bottom, if you want to add a new stroke, you can do that here. If you want to add a new fill, you do that from here. If you want to add an effect, you can do that from here. If you want to clear an appearance, you can do that from here. If you want to add or duplicate an item, you can do that here. I typically use these more than I do these over here. And then obviously, if you want to delete an item, you can here. So that's what all of these do. So what they're having us do to start is we're going to take the stroke and we're going to remove it. So I'm going to take the color of it, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to select that I don't want any appearance for that. Okay, and then I can come back over here and make sure that this is set to 0. Since we don't have an appearance, it should already go to that. Okay, and then what we can do down here is that just off the top, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add another fill to this. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the fill from here. I might depart from the textbook just a little bit. So to change the color of the fill, I can do that from here. I can click here, and I believe we want this one. Here's Mountain 1. So I'm going to make this Mountain 1. Okay. So that's what we have. So I've changed that from here. This so far is nothing new. But what if I want to go ahead and I want and add another fill to this? As I said, you can have multiple strokes. You can have multiple fills. And I've shown you this before, but it certainly bears repeating because I think it will, by using these features, it will enhance the quality of your illustrations or design. So I'll go ahead and from the textbook, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a new fill here. Notice how it adds it at the very top. And that's okay. I like keeping my strokes together and I like keeping my fills together. So that's why I don't use this. I generally duplicate the fills or the strokes, and then I make edits to them. So what we're going to do from here, though, is we're going to take, and I'm going to, instead of this doubling the solid fill, I'm going to click from here, and we have, it's called the gravel beach. It's a pattern fill. And you'll notice how this little pattern appears above the gray fill. So we can turn this off if we wish. If this were in fact beneath the other fill, it would become invisible. So just as you layer objects on your screen, within the appearance panel, you can layer fills and strokes on top of one another. Right? So if you want that to be visible, it needs to be above. Now, it doesn't have to be above the stroke. It has to be above the other fill. But if you do want it above the other stroke, if we had a stroke, you could. So you can actually, with these other, in the properties panel, the options panel, and that sort of thing, you can't overlap strokes and fills, and you can do that here. Okay, so that's what we're starting with there. What else are we going to do here? One of the things that we're going to do is that you'll notice, for example, I'll deselect this for the time being. And I'm going to select this inner stroke here. This is the wheel. And this is not a fill for that. This is simply a stroke. And you'll notice with it selected, it's a 42-point stroke and it's on the outside. If you recall, when you bring up the stroke panel, that you can control whether you want the stroke to be on the outside, the inside, or by default, it straddles both the inside and the outside. Well, right now, this is on the outside, and you can control that. So what we're going to do, though, is we want these little ridges on our wheel. So what we can do is we can add an additional stroke. So what I'll do is with the stroke selected, I'm going to go ahead and select that. So we have another one. I don't want a 42-point stroke. I just want it to be 10-point. That's another really wide one. So 10-point. Okay. Now you don't see it. It doesn't look any different. However, if I come back in here and I click on this stroke, and now I select dashed line, and we use 12-point. Okay. Come on. Should be here. Why aren't you there? Let's make sure that this too is on, yeah, see by default, yeah, it is on the outside. So that should be, let's make this on the inside, just so you can see. Okay, so that's on the inside of the stroke now. And again, anytime, you apply an effect like this and you don't see the desired result, recheck like I'm doing right now. It's when I did this exercise the other day, it was already set for inside for some reason. And notice how if I select the align to the stroke to center, it's just, you only see half of the width now. So here's the 10-point that we see. And later on in the exercise, why we don't do it now, I don't know, but we're going to move this to the outside of the wheel. Okay, so that's another useful effect of adding multiple appearances. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add multiple appearances to the text. So I need to deselect the wheel or the tire, and I'm going to select the text. Now, it's something important to note that when you just select the object of the text, it shows that it's type, and we have characters, and we don't have any attributes, but we can add them if we wish. If I want to add a fill to this, which we will, I can do that from here. However, if I select the text tool and I highlight the text, notice it's very different. I only have the option of the fill. I cannot add, I can't really add anything multiple effects to that. So I'm going to go back to the selection tool. And with this type selected, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a fill here. And I don't want black for the time being. That's what I have. But instead, they have another fill that they want us to add. So you can add fill to type. Now, obviously, in order to be able to see the fill, and that's true when you add gradients to strokes and other things like that, they have to be visible. They have to be wide enough in order to see that. So what we're going to do here, I got to remember the name of the darn thing. This is intermittent pond. So I'm going to go ahead and with this fill, I'm going to click here and I'm going to bring this up. And I believe it's this one here, intermittent pond. So there's our fill for that. Now also notice that the opacity that you see down here and the opacity that you see here they do the same thing, but they're different. You can control the opacity for each individual stroke and each individual fill that you add. Or if you want to control all of them together, you can control the opacity here, or you can do both. In this particular instance, I'm going to change the opacity of just the fill, and I'm going to change it to 20%.
Professor?
Yeah, change. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So notice that I've changed that, but if I change it to overall, instead, look at the background here. It will change the background as well. It will change the appearance of the entire thing. So I need to come back and let's look at panelists, and Brooke needs to be changed to focus. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Okie doke. So watch, if I change here, the overall, see how it's affecting not that individual fill, but it's affecting the entire type. And I don't want that. I just wanted that additional fill that I added to be a little bit more subtle. And I think it's a little too subtle for my taste, but that's the way it goes. Okay. So again, just a way of controlling individual elements or the whole thing. And that's what we can do. The other thing that we're going to do now is we're going to group these two. Let's go ahead and deselect this. To show you the difference between adding a filter to a group and individual elements. So if I select this mountain and I hold down the shift key and I select this mountain, and then I go ahead and I add an effect and I add a drop shadow. Okay, so I'm going to come down here to stylize and add drop shadow. Okay, and I'm going to leave it for right now. Let's turn off and turn on preview. Let's see if it does that. Oh, I think I was supposed to group it. So be first. Hold on here. Let me try that just for the heck of it. I'm going to go ahead and I have this middle one selected and hold down the shift key, select this one, and then I'm going to hit Command G for group so that they are grouped together. Now you'll notice the appearance, how that changes. It shows that it is a group. And if I add the effect to it, and I come down here, and in a few minutes, we're also going to notice, you might notice that when you're adding effects, there are Illustrator effects and there are Photoshop effects. We'll talk about that in a bit too. So let's go to stylize. Let's add drop shadow. And let's turn that off and turn it back on. And I'm supposed to see an effect. And I don't see anything. Let's look at their settings to make sure. Got to make sure that the setting is multiply is to mode is to multiply. We want the opacity set to 50%. 50%. We want the offset to be 0 inches. We want the offset here to be 0 inches. And we want color. So let's turn that off and turn it back on and see what we get. Anything? I don't see anything. I should be seeing out here. Let's see if I see what I'm supposed to see. And I'm not seeing anything. So somewhere along the lines here, I messed up. Let me stop the recording for a minute and see where I messed up. So I'm gonna go ahead and pause. Okay, so I'm gonna try again. I've got both of the mountains selected. I'm gonna hit Command G for group. I had both monitors selected, so I didn't. Okay, now both of them are selected, Command G for group. So we do see a group here. Now down below, let me add an effect again. Let's go to Stylize and let's add Drop Shadow. It has the previous settings that I have selected. And I'm gonna click OK, and I don't see anything. So I'm still having troubles here. I'm gonna pause this again. Okay, folks, so I discovered what I was doing wrong. One little bitty thing. I'm gonna go ahead and select both of these items again. I'm gonna hit Command G for group. So they are grouped. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add an effect to that group. And I'm gonna select Stylize, Drop Shadow. Okay. Now, I wanna make sure that I have used the settings that they have. Mode should be set to multiply. Opacity is set to 50%. And offsets are supposed to be set to 0. Okay. Blur is what I had forgotten to do before. That needs to be set to 1/4 inch or 0.25 inches. Now you'll notice when I click OK, the drop shadow has been added to the group. And you'll notice because the middle mountain and the back mountain are now grouped, it only applies it to the outside here. That's the drop shadow I was looking for. Now watch what happens when I ungroup them. So if I go to Object, Ungroup, or Shift Command G, they're ungrouped and that effect goes away. So what you can do is that I could apply it to all of the mountains, or I could select each of these objects as individual elements. I don't want that. Again, let's select this object and this object. And I have multiple paths, so I have mixed appearances. And now when I apply the effect and I go to Stylize and I select Drop Shadow, notice that it's applied to both of them separately now. That's what I want. And again, it's using the last settings that I used. Okay, so I got that working. I had forgotten the blur. So all is good. So the next step is what we're going to do now is we're going to start to add effects to our type and a few other things. So what I want to do is I want to select both of these items here. And I can add effects from here, or I can come up to the effects from here. And I'm going to select warp, and I want to select arc. Okay. Again, these are really useful, I find. And the reason that I think they're useful is that they're editable. They can constantly be edited as long as you want. And if you're not happy with that particular warp effect, you can add another one. So that what they want us to do now is we're going to crank this up to 65%. So it's a little bit tighter, and it follows the curvature of the wheel underneath a little bit. Okay, but you'll notice the bottom one, we don't want it going in that direction. We want it going in the opposite direction. So if I select the type, and I go back here, and I go back to the warp effect in the appearance panel, and I click on that, it brings up the dialog box. So instead of 65%, I'm going to go to -65%. And there we go. Oh, there we go. So that's looking good. And at any time, as I said, if you want to edit the effects, for example, I can select this one again. I can click on the warp effect, and instead of 65%, maybe we can change it to 64, something like that. Just a very, small incremental change. And we have what we want. Okay. So they're constantly.
Professor, do you mind changing the spotlight to Bernice?
Sure. Okay. Wait, I need to change it to Bernice, or?
Yes.
Okay. That? Got it? Okay. Okie doke. So that's a way of adding effects. Now, we're really not using that many effects in here. Not many at all. But some of them I think are really underused and important, and it's something that you should explore yourself, not only for type, but for the other objects. So again, you can either go over here under the effects panel, under the appearance panel rather, or you can come up here to effects and you can apply them. The only thing that I caution you about when you apply effects, especially the Photoshop effects, is that they can be very taxing on the processor of your computer. Okay, they can really take up a lot of memory. So there's something that I would, try to exhibit some restraint. And you'll notice that every time you move an object or whatever, it has to redraw, and it will take an inordinate amount of time after a while if you've added too many effects, and oftentimes your whole computer will crash as a result of that. But if you use them judiciously, they can be really, really helpful. So the other one that they want us to do is we're going to select the tire again, and we're going to apply an effect to it. So let's go ahead and select the tire. And the effect that we're going to add to this, specifically the stroke, okay? So I want to make sure that it is the stroke, this top stroke, that is targeted. And I'm going to add an effect to it. And that effect is under SVG. Wait a minute, no, it's not. It is, yeah, I thought it was. Hold on here. Wait a minute, I gotta pause again. I'm forgetting where it is. So let me go ahead and pause. So where it was, and make sure that this stroke is targeted, just the interior one. Under effects, it's under path, and it's offset path. That's what we want. And so now I'm going to put in the number that they've given us, and it will push that outside. So again, we want it to be 0.57 inches. So I'm going to go back in here and make sure that the inches is visible. 0.57 inches. Let's turn off and back on the miter 4. Okay, I grouped again, 1. And it shows that the offset path is being applied to that stroke. So why isn't it visible at all now? Let me go ahead. I'm going to pause again. Boy, lots of pauses. This went so smoothly. The other resume recording. So the reason that wasn't visible is I need to switch this stroke and make sure, rather than being on the inside, it needs to be on the outside now. And that's why you can't see it. If I switch back to inside, it's visible. But when we offset the path, then it needs to be now on the outside. And we're pushing that broken line out, way out here beyond this 42-point rule. Okay, so we have that. And I can go ahead and close that so that that's done. Now to this targeted, this particular path, I can go ahead to effects. I can go to path and I can select offset path, and it's going to be 0.57 inches. Now the little ridge is pushed all the way out to the outside. So again, if you apply one of those effects and you're not sure, you have to troubleshoot like I was doing. But we got that working now. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to switch and we're going to apply some Photoshop effects. I'm going to switch some of these. I think this one back here, instead of this fill, it really should be, I think, the light gray. So I'm going to switch to it. I'm not sure if it is or it isn't, but it's make it look a little bit better. Maybe this is meant to be the darker gray. I think the front one is supposed to be the darker one. But what we're going to do is we're going to apply under here a graphic style to this, okay, a Photoshop effect. So one of the things that we need to do is, let me get all of these straightened out. This will be the light one, this will be the medium, and I'm going to take this one and I'm going to make this one the darker one here, okay? And I'm also going to turn off this top fill, just so that we have that. So we have, everything is looking pretty good. So what I want to do is to apply this effect to all three of these. You can apply effects to layers, and that's what this target is here. If you have the your layers panel up visible, okay, I can apply this by clicking this little button right here to the entire layer. So by targeting that layer, I can now go to, let's bring up our graphic styles. And one of the things that they wanted us to add is these guys here. I'll come back to that in a minute. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Effect, and I'm going to go to Effect Gallery and bring that up. Notice that another window pops up. The one that it wants us to use is at the very bottom here. It's the texture gallery down here. It wants us to scale it to, number one, it wants us to use the texture sandstone. You'll notice that they have a few others. I mean, if you wanted a brick texture, you've got to add that. It's kind of cool. You can always change the scale. They've got burlap. And that can add a really nice effect to your illustration if you want it to look more painterly. It actually look like canvas, kind of a very rough canvas. But they want us to use sandstone. They want us to change the scaling to about 145%. And the relief is set to 4, and we want the light direction to be at the top. So because we're applying it to the entire layer, you'll notice that if I zoom out of this, and it's really kind of hard for you to see, but it will be applied to all of these, the entire mountain layer. In that particular instance, that's what we want to do. And it's a very subtle effect. You would only see that if we were printing it. On screen, it really isn't something that you can see very clearly. So the next thing that we're going to do, and tomorrow what I want to do is I want to show you adding 3D effects, how those can be kind of nice, especially when you add them to type. But anyway, unfortunately, that's not covered here in the lesson. But if I select this background and I come up here to graphic styles, I'm going to make sure that graphic styles has popped off here. If you want to get a preview of what graphic styles look like, you can right click on these and it's going to give you an idea of what it's going to look like without applying it. So that's a right click or a control click. What we want to do here, though, is, and the reason that you want to use the preview is that sometimes, as I was mentioning, that these graphic styles can add a ton of memory to your processor. Can really be very taxing on your processor. So that time we're going to go back here. Now I jumped ahead with the fill, so I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to go back to that yellow that we had. I think it was this yellow right here. There we go. We're going to go back to that. And if I wanted to use these multiple style effects or styles that I've added to a particular, to my library that I wanted to reuse again and again, what I could do is I could take this object, and if I go ahead and I hold down the control key and I click, whoops, maybe it's the command, no, I gotta make sure got it selected. I'm going to go ahead and drag this into the graphic styles. And you'll notice that it just added it right here. Okay, let me do that again. So let's delete style, yes. So let's go back again. I want to go back to the fill color that I had originally. I want to go back to that yellow. There we go. Okay. Now, if I take this and I drag it in here, like so. Well, there we go, it added it. So at any other time, for example, if I selected this back mountain in the background, and I wanted it to have the same attributes as the mountain in the foreground, and I had forgotten the settings that I had used, if I had forgotten the exact color, if I had forgotten the drop shadow attributes and that sort of thing, then I could click this button right here and it would add it to it since I've done that. Now what we can do is that since I've gone back to the old one, if I select the fill again, so I'm going to go back here and I want it to be the dark gray. Okay. So let's go ahead and make sure that I have the right one selected. Let me undo. There we go. I had the wrong shape selected. I want this one selected. There we go. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to select the dark gray.
And when you get a chance, could we have you switch the interpreters?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Now my computer's slowing down and I've got lots of RAM and that sort of thing. So I want to update this style. Hold on one second and I'm going to change this. Let's see. We want to go to which? You want to go to Brooke? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to take this style from here and I want to update it. So to update it, I'll go ahead and select the shape. And if I click and I drag it and I put it on top of the old one, notice how well, and I've actually added it and I didn't want to add it. So let me undo that. I'm going to hold down the command key as I click and I drag it. And let's try that one. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Maybe it's the control key, not the command key. So if I hold down, I just want to update the styles and I'm not updating them. So it has to do with the order that I'm doing these. Hold down the control key. Nope. Let me pause this again. Okay, the mistake that I made is that if you want to add a new style, graphic style, then I just simply click and I drag it over. And that now I have the one for the yellow with the drop shadow, and I have one for the deep gray. But if I want to update the yellow one, you hold down the Option key and drag it on top of that. And now you'll notice that it's been updated. Okay. Applying, we did this before, but we're going to do it again. I'm going to go ahead and select, you'll notice over here that under graphic styles, we have something called shadow. And again, it's a very particular setting for the drop shadow. And if I don't want to apply it to these shapes individually, but the entire layer, then I'll make sure that I have my layers panel up. And here we have mountains. In this particular case, we want text. Okay. Actually, we want the block text, not all of the text. So I'll target just the block text, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the shadow to it. And notice that it's added it to both of these. Again, just be aware that when you're adding effects, do you want to target an individual path, or do you want to target an entire layer, or it could be multiple paths? You have those options. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to scale strokes and effects. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to close graphic styles, and I want to turn on the spokes. Okay, big. Okie doke. So normally when you scale this, it doesn't necessarily scale the strokes. So with this, you know, it doesn't scale the width of the paths or anything, or the colors, or if it has a fill. So if I come in here and I want to scale and I click this right here, you'll notice that you have to make sure that scale strokes and effects are selected. If you don't want it, then that's okay too. But I'm going to go ahead and I want to change the size of this, which is way too large. I'm going to go ahead and drop it down to 5 inches, I think is the size that they wanted. And that's not that. I have the wrong one selected. Boy, I'm not doing well today, huh? Let me go to edit. I'm going to pause this again for the umpteenth time. So I'm going to resume the recording. Again, make sure under this little tab right here that I have scale, strokes, and effects selected. And then I'm going to change the width and the height, which need to be linked. I'm going to go ahead and change the width to 5 inches. There you go. Now it fits. And notice that the width of the stroke and the effects are scaled accordingly to the new size. That works really nicely. And I think with all of my mistakes today, that we've got it done. So we have some extra time, just a little bit of extra time. So let me show you today some of the things that we can do with graphic styles, because there are some libraries of graphic styles that you should probably look into. And for certain effects, I think the 3D effects are really kind of nice. Not for everything. They can look a little hokey, but they can look kind of nice. Are there any questions from anyone so far? No? Okay. So let me create a brand new file. And I'm going to start by using some text. And I'm just going to, for example, use my name. And instead of Myriad Pro Regular, I'm going to use, I want it to be really bold. How about something else then? Instead of Myriad Pro, something, let's try Cooper Black. That might work. And I don't want regular. Let's go ahead and bump this up a good size. Make it 72 point. Oh, come on. 72 point. There we go. And instead of lorem ipsum, I'll just use my name. Okay. Now, if I add a stroke to this, let's go ahead and add kind of a bright yellow for the stroke. And I need to make sure that I maybe bump up the width of the stroke a little bit. So you can see that. Let's try that again. It's nice bright yellow. There you go. So you can actually see that. Now, if you want, we can go ahead and I'm going to bring up graphic styles again. Let's go ahead here. And I'm going to go to, no, that's not it. Where are my graphic styles? I don't see them. So I'm going to go to Window, Graphic Styles, and that will bring it back up. There you go. Okay. So let's go ahead into the library of graphic styles and let's look at 3D effects. Okay. And there's lots of them. And I can go ahead. I'm going to move this temporarily just so you can see what's going on here. And let's try this one. And as soon as I apply that effect to the entire, you got to select it first. That would be helpful. As soon as I select that and I apply the effect, notice that it's going through the motions. See what's going on here. Now you can have an interesting three-dimensional effect. Now, if you want to try out the others, you can. If you want to edit them or create your own effects, you can do that as well. But in certain, instances, these 3D effects, I think, can be pretty powerful. You can see all the various options here. And these are all part of the library of effects. And at the same time, you can see that as I click, each time I click a new one, it takes, with my computer that has 64 gigabytes of RAM, and it has a 2 terabyte hard drive, and it's super fast. It takes time to redraw. So again, it's kind of a cautionary tale. As I said, that if you do choose to use graphic styles or effects, that you need to be careful, because the more you use, the more it will slow down your computer. But if you like the look of this could be kind of cool. And this would have been nice for some of you for your skateboard. And it's something that you might consider using in your final assignment. You aren't restricted in any way. So if you want to use text in some way, you can. And these 3D effects would be kind of nice. They'd work really well. Okay. Anyway, these graphic styles are nothing more than a combination of styles that have been thrown together into a unit, and then they've been added to these libraries. Okay. And you can see every time that you apply one of these, that when you look at the appearance panel, you can see that if there are multiple strokes in this particular case, there's a 4-point stroke, which is the red. There's a 20-point stroke, which is the bigger blue. And then there's a 30-point stroke, which is the lighter blue. And that's why we're getting that effect. And then what we've done is we've applied a 3D extrude and bevel to it. And that's what gives us the depth there. And if we were to look at that effect, it would allow you to go in and change the light source so that, or add multiple light sources so that you get the desired look that you want. Okay, so that can be kind of fun. Those are really kind of nice. Again, I'm going to pause. Yeah, so as I was saying, tomorrow what I'd like to do is to continue with this, but depart from the textbook and to show you some examples of appearances that I like to apply. They give shapes, paths a much richer appearance, and that aren't as taxing as the 3D, as the effects or the effects panel or graphic styles, because those are multiples that are added all at once. Anyway, that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover today, unless you guys have questions. No? And again, it doesn't take much to get tripped up, you know. I'm trying to memorize the textbook so I don't have to look at it that frequently. But from time to time, if I forget certain things, like I did with the blur, so that the drop shadow wouldn't appear, things like that. It doesn't take much to trip you up. Or is the path on the inside, the middle, or the outside to get the desired effect? But if you're applying an effect or a style or changing the appearance in any way and it isn't showing up, then you just have to troubleshoot. You have to go through all of those various options to see what could possibly be the snag, and all of that. But I do like the appearance panel an awful lot. It's kind of one-stop shopping. It's condensed. You can tell pretty much on an individual path everything that's being applied to it, from transparency to effects to you name it. Multiple strokes, multiple fills. And again, they can be quite simple, is what we've done so far, or they can be extremely complex. Okay, so if there aren't any further questions or any questions at all, I'm going to go ahead and let me pause, and I'm going to take roll, and then everybody's free to go.